Oh, let me throw the chat up here. All right, what's up, everybody? My name is Jerry. I'm here alongside my co-host Jordan, and we are a new segment here with Going for Two called Bet on It. One of the biggest things that we had this past, what was it, past week and a half, was we have sports betting live here in New York. We're in the state of New York on the apps now. So like DraftKings, FanDuel, all those other apps that are out there. I mean, there's 100 of them now. We used to be able to just go to the casino and do it there, but now because it's 2022, everybody's lazy. We could all just do it right from the comfort of our own home on our phones. So, and we've been betting even before it was legal on here, and just want to come out and talk to you guys about different bets that we like, and we're going to be in every other Friday show. The next couple Fridays, though, so this weekend, the divisional weekend and the conference championship weekend for the NFL, we're going to be on. Skip the week, and then we're going to be back on for the Super Bowl, and then it's going to be every other after that, and just kind of go over our favorite bets for the week. Primarily, the next 3 weeks is going to be football, but we're also going to talk some basketball, some hockey, college basketball, and any other sports whenever UFC is coming up. So, Jordan, you want to tell them a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to be here. I don't know what it says about my life, but when online betting was legalized in New York, it was the greatest thing that's happened to me in years. So I'm excited. I've been primarily using FanDuel. So I know you've been on a little bit of everything, but I've been kind of going wild with it the last few days. I've actually had some pretty good success before. So looking forward to talking a little bit about that, and I'm glad that I don't have to go to Costa Rica anymore. I can just stay home and do it. So,
Yeah, it's over the past, like I said, what do we get it? We got it Saturday, Friday. I think it was Saturday
yeah,
morning.
it was in Saturday. Yeah, I was in LA, so my time zone was all messed up.
But and it's not even legal out there, I don't think either. But I
I
mean,
had
I've
to
had
phone my
bets in.
girlfriend in New York.
Yeah, had to drive over to Nevada. It's we've had I've had bets in every night, just different sports. Obviously, started with football, and they had some promotions going on. But let's kick it off with basketball. We'll say football for last. Um, Obviously, tonight's games, it's already 10 o'clock on the East Coast, so the Western Coast games are just starting now, and it's kind of late to put them in. So we're just going to get into Saturdays and Sundays games. I personally am not really huge into basketball, but I do follow trends and stuff like that. So Jordan will talk more about this sport. I'll just give you like the games that I like. And then earlier when I made my notes, the spreads weren't up there, but they're up there now. Um, so I'm gonna just kind of go over them and tell you what I like, and Jordan will either agree with me or disagree with me.
Usually disagree.
So it's a not a heavy slate tomorrow. Looks like it's about 6 games or so, 6 7 games. The games that I like the most are the Bucks over the Raptors. That's my top game that I like the most. That game is the spread is not listed on here. So just money line, I guess, would be Bucks over Raptors. They both, I mean, Bucks just came off a nice win over the Warriors last night in a game that should have been a lot closer than what it was. But I mean, Giannis just he balled out. Um, so just like without any kind of props in that game, a straight bet, I would go Bucks over Raptors in that game.
Yeah, one of the ones that and I mean, one of the things you really have to pay attention this year, especially in the NBA, is guys are going in and out of the COVID protocols. Like that's actually their job instead of playing basketball. So that's really one of the big things that you have to watch and take advantage of. So the other night, for example, Kyrie and Kevin Durant got ruled out kind of last minute. And the Nets got absolutely destroyed by the Thunder, which was, before that game, a full strength Nets, you're probably taking the over with and the spread. I think it was 10 and a half, I want to say. Even still, that's a game that the Nets normally are going to dominate, but so things change last minute. So if you're betting on the NBA, it's one of those things you have to pay attention kind of right up until game time. That's kind of the first thing that I'll say in general. So I look at trends quite a bit. Teams that are hot, how teams play on the road, how teams play at home. Especially in the NBA, things change. Fluctuate on the daily. So, one of the games that I like on Saturday is actually the Spurs and Clippers. The Spurs, if you look over their last 10 games, haven't been very hot, but they've arguably been hit by COVID harder than any team in the league. they're going to be at full strength now. DeJounte Murray's back, Keldon Johnson, Lonnie Walker. They're ready to go now. So the Pistons kind of been, or not the Pistons, sorry.
Yeah.
The Clippers have been struggling a little bit. They've been up and down. It's a strong. Both of these teams are. Oh, the Clippers are strong defensively. The Spurs have been a little inconsistent, but historically are good defensively. So it's a game where I like the under. I like the Spurs, and I know they've been getting some unfavorable lines recently based on what they've been doing. But at full strength, I think this is a game that's going to be really close.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't have that one on mine. The next game you already mentioned the Nets, and you actually have the Pelicans. What do you have, the Pelicans over the Nets? I have the Nets over the Pelicans, and that's, I mean, we don't know if Kyrie's going to be back or not. But I mean, like you said it yourself, the Nets at full strength, they're one of the best teams in the league, and that game is also, spread is not there. All right, so I'm striking out here.
It's very last minute, yeah.
Yeah. Um, But yeah, so I mean, like, what I'm probably gonna do and what I've been doing with the NBA and even the NHL, I really don't like putting together individual bets for them. So I'm probably just gonna run like a 4 or 5 leg parlay. And if I like the spread, I'll go with the spread. But for the most part, I'm probably just gonna do the money line. So why don't I just run down mine, and then you could talk more about yours. But Bucks over
Sure.
Raptors already said, Nets over Pelicans, Bulls over the Celtics, Mavericks over the Magic, and then the Wizards over the Trailblazers. If you look, they are, most of them are going to be on the favorite side, so it is kind of a cop out, I guess. But like I said, if I'm putting the five of them together, for like a 5 leg parlay, I like that overall.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll get into that as we move along. My betting strategy is a little different than most people. I tend to do smaller ones where I usually pair a spread with the over under because I find
Mhm.
it a lot easier to analyze a single game. You can look at individual matchups, and I think that it's easier to hit on those. And actually, if you look at a lot of the statistics, if you're betting legged parlays, it's still a parlay, still counts if it has
Yeah.
two. People don't look at it that way, but you only actually have to hit on 53% of your bets in order to be profitable. I mean, that's a rate that I'm pretty comfortable with. I have enough faith in my knowledge and ability to analyze a game where I think I can hit on 53% of them. So when I was doing some research, I thought that was kind of interesting. Another thing to keep an eye out for in the NBA are teams coming off to back-to-back games and look at their travel schedule a little bit. And, you don't have to get that in depth, but usually when a team plays two games, two nights in a row, that second night you see them become a little sluggish. Now, it's not every team, but that's just a trend that you see in general. So that's something else when you're looking through the slate. Just check quickly who played last night, how did they play, who'd they play against? Was it a three overtime game? I'm guessing they're going to be pretty tired the next night, and typically that's a game you're going to see it go under, and you're going to see them typically not cover the spread. So that's just another small thing in the NBA. I'm going to go out the other side. You've mentioned some of the favorites. I'll talk about a few of the underdogs that I like the next few days. One of the reasons I have the Pelicans and Nets, and we'll see what that spread comes out to be, but it's actually in Brooklyn. So Kyrie isn't playing since he's not vaccinated. He's still not allowed to play in Brooklyn. So that's something to always keep in mind whenever you're betting on the Nets is Kyrie's only playing half their games, and obviously, I mean, they've been really good without Kyrie, but it's hard to replace a guy like that. So typically, I'm more comfortable betting against the Nets without Kyrie. We'll see. Durant's been a little banged up. The Pelicans have actually burned me the last few nights. They're actually on a decent streak for them, right? They're 5-5 in their last 10, which doesn't sound sexy, but they've been one of the worst teams in the Western Conference. So 5-5 is pretty good, honestly. They've been covering and actually winning as of late. So with no Kyrie, if Durant's out, I think there's some potential value there with the Pelicans tomorrow, depending on what that final line is. The other one that I have tomorrow, I mentioned the Spurs and Clippers. The Knicks have been hot as of late. They're playing the Hawks tomorrow, who are 3-7 over their last 10. They've lost two straight games. Knicks on the other side, 7-3, 2-game winning streak. I think there's some value there betting on the Knicks. Then I have Sunday. Same thing. We have the Warriors traveling to Minnesota. These are two teams that have been very high scoring. We'll see what the over under comes out at, but this is a game that I would expect to probably hit the over. The Warriors, the game just finalized. I think they scored 138 points tonight. So this is a team that can explode really at a moment's notice. So I think that a strong possibility for the over on the Warriors and Timberwolves. Warriors have actually, as good as they've been this season, have kind of struggled on the road as well. They're 12-8 on the road, which, considering they're one of the best teams in the Western Conference right now, 12-8 is super underwhelming. So if you're betting against the Warriors, the time to do it is when they're playing on the road,
Mhm.
which they are this weekend. And the Timberwolves have been pretty good recently. They've kind of been clicking. They're healthy. They can't play defense, so that's why I like the over. Really, anytime I'm betting on the Timberwolves, no matter who they're playing. But those are just a few of the underdogs that I have this weekend to keep an eye on. Pelicans, Timberwolves, Knicks and Hawks will probably be a pretty close spread, but I like the Knicks because they're hot, and then the Spurs over the Clippers.
Yeah, it's tough because not a lot of games the spreads are out there just yet. Um, a lot of the teams that the spreads aren't out there are teams that have not played tonight, so they're like not coming off the back to back. I'm
Hmm.
noticing that. I just want to piggyback off a couple things that you said. Another thing with the back to backs too is not just looking at how they played last night, this and that, but you also want to look at who sat too. If any of the big guys sat, any of the big starters sat, or how especially if you're getting into. Now we're not a DFS show, but if you are getting into stuff like DFS too, if you're looking and see that player so and so, who's normally a bench guy, played an extended amount of minutes, it's because they had the back to back, and he might not play those same minutes the next game. So you want to check stuff out like that too, especially when you're putting together like player props. Oh, this guy got 25 points the night before. He's easily going to get 20 tonight. That's not always the case.
Hmm.
Um, and then just off the Warriors too, I don't think you mentioned that. I mean, they're still getting in the groove with Clay Thompson coming back too. So that road
Hmm.
record's probably going to change coming down the stretch here.
Yeah, I would anticipate it's going to take a little time for him to get acclimated. Draymond Green has been out, which hurts them defense. Typically, the Warriors are a really lockdown defensive team, but Draymond's kind of their anchor defensively. So him being out is one of the reasons I've kind of liked the over and on a lot of the Warriors games recently. But keep an eye out for when he's back because that's going to change very quickly. They were allowing, I think they were top five in terms of points allowed defensively when he was playing, and they've kind of slipped recently. But
All right. Moving on to the NHL. It's a little bit easier with the spreads because most of the time, now there are some times where the goal spread is more than a goal and a half, but for the most part, a goal and a half is usually what most of the betting sites are giving them. So it's either you're betting the money line or you're betting that so and so is going to win by 2 goals. The games that I like the most, and for Saturday, and then Sunday only has one game. Sunday has the Capitals versus the Canucks. There's another game, but that was postponed for COVID. There's still a bunch of games that are hit with the COVID. A lot of Canadian host teams are trying to make up their games somewhere. There's the Olympic break coming up, so maybe they'll be made up there. But as far as Saturday goes, I like the Capitals over the Islanders. The Sabres over the Red Wings, that's going to be a crazy one because the Sabres are one of the worst teams in the league. But the thing about that one is not specifically that one, but the Sabres have been really good. Not really good, but they've been better on the road than they have been at home. 3-1-2 on the road. They just were down in Nashville last night, and I mean that was one of the games where Nashville had a two and a half goal spread, and I mean they were able to actually they won it in regulation. Buffalo won in regulation, so they're just a different team when they're on the road. Hurricanes over the Canucks. I know that you are opposite of me on that one. Avalanche over Coyotes. That's just a Coyotes are another one of those bad teams. That one I would probably take the spread on that one, the 1.5 goals. And Panthers over Blue Jackets. Both of those teams have been well. Panthers have been really hot. Blue Jackets have been up and down. I'm going with the home team there with the Panthers.
okay. Few that I have this weekend. You mentioned the Canucks. I have them covering over Carolina. They've been fairly hot as of late, 7-2-1 after a really slow start. And when I'm looking at NHL games, personally, I'm primarily looking at who's in goal that night. I mean, a
Yeah,
lot
that's
of
the
times
biggest
that's
thing.
going to determine whether I'm going with the over under. If they're playing a backup goalie, a guy that just got called up from the AHL, whatever it might be, I'm going to be more prone to go on the over. Um, so that's the biggest thing. Similar to when we get to baseball in the summer, a lot of it has to do with pitching matchups, and I am very excited to get into that because I love me some baseball betting. But um, yeah, I mean, that's primarily it's one of those things. It's tough to say right now, go this way, go that way, but the best advice I can give is look at the goaltending matchups, see how that goalie's been recently, see how they've been on the road versus home. Just small little things like that can definitely give you an advantage. So the Canucks have been hot right now. I tend to bet on teams that are hot.
Yeah.
That's a tried and true strategy. I'm not going to bet on somebody 100% turning around, being cold, or all of a sudden getting stymied. So I tend to go with people that are hot. So I think this is a game the Canucks definitely have the potential to cover. Let's see. I also have the Penguins over the Sharks, which I like, and then the Ducks over the Blackhawks. The Blackhawks goaltending has really struggled as of late. They've allowed the most goals over the last month here. The Ducks have been very high powered offensively, so this is a game that I'd say goes over. And whenever this is a kind of a match made in heaven for me for the whenever you're looking at over unders, a team whose goaltending has really been terrible versus a team whose offense has been, fairly hot as of late. So I'm going with the Ducks over that one. Those were really the three games that I had highlighted.
Yeah, I mean, hockey is probably more unpredictable than the NBA is, and definitely more unpredictable than the NFL. I mean, on any given night, it's just you could have the fourth string goaltender in the net and win 3-0. So
Yeah.
it's these are just, I mean, and it's another sport that they do back to backs. You got to, I mean, they don't really sit as many players as the NBA does on any given night, but that's another one where, and their overtimes are more limited too. You get a 5 minute overtime, then you go to a shootout, so it's not like they're skating for 80, 90 minutes. But it is something that there is fatigue. Definitely, they're going full speed and skating around the ice, 200-foot ice, and but it's definitely something to keep your eye on with back to backs. And if starting goalie A is playing on one night, and then they got the backup in the next night, maybe take the other team in the next night with the back or against the backup.
Hmm.
Do you have anything for the NCAA, or do you want to get into NFL?
Let's talk about the NFL. That's the bread and butter,
All
baby.
right, something that is a little bit more confident, something that we're going to be a little bit more comfortable talking about. Um, Starting with the first game kicking off the playoffs is going to be the Raiders, the 5 seed Raiders up against the Bengals. And one little side note that I found interesting. I mean, it's not as interesting with the 17 game schedule, but one little side note that I have found interesting this year is every single matchup is a rematch of a game from the regular season, except for the San Francisco and Dallas game. Every other team, they've already seen each other at least once. Two divisional games in this wild card round, so they got 2 games under their belt against each other. But this first game, in we got the 5 seed Raiders up against the 6 seed Bengals. Bengals, and all my lines are according to DraftKings from when I did earlier. Bengals are 5.5 point favorites. Over under is 48.5. We got both quarterbacks coming in. Derek Carr, Joe Burrow making their postseason debuts. Um, Derek Carr's team has made the playoffs before back in 2018, but Derek Carr was out for that game. So this is technically his first start in the playoffs, unless he gets hurt by tomorrow. Um,
Why would you even say that?
oh no, bet the over. They met in week 11. The Bengals won 32-13. So 45 points there that wouldn't have covered this current over. I do like the under again. I like the Bengals and the under final score 27-20. Now I'm probably going to do a whole bunch of different kind of bets as far as like for the NFL. I might do a spread and an over under. I might just do a spread. I might do a couple bet money line. But I was playing around and I have a 3 leg single game parlay for each of these games that we're going to talk about. and so I'll tell you what they are and what their payout is. So single game parlay for this one is plus 525. I'm taking the Bengals minus 5.5 based off my score prediction. The 27-20 would cover it. Based off my score prediction, that's also under 48 points. So that's 47 points. And then I threw a Joe Mixon touchdown in there back in that week 11 matchup. Joe Mixon had 2 touchdowns. Aside from week 18, um, he pretty much played in every single game. And week 18 wasn't even an injury, it was COVID. So he's been fairly injury free, knock on wood, for the whole season. Finished top 5 in yards. He had a bunch of touchdowns. He catches the ball out of the backfield. So a Joe Mixon touchdown could be through the air or on the ground. And the Raiders' rush defense, they're a better pass defense than they are rush defense. Overall, I mean, their defense is middle of the road overall, but I think they're. I know Burrow has all those weapons: Higgins, Chase, Boyd, but I think Mixon is. But like I said, Mixon can do it through the air too. But I think Mixon is gonna see Pater at least once tomorrow.
Yeah, I do agree. I think this is a game where Joe Mixon's going to be heavily involved, and I'll throw out some stats for you because you know I like my numbers. Well, just to kick things off, there is the potential for snow in this game. I know Jerry doesn't want to talk about weather, but trust me, I'm bringing it up with the Bills game, and we're going to talk about it. But yeah, there's the potential for snow. Obviously, that's definitely gonna fade depending on the wind conditions and what happens and shakes out with that. That definitely could make the under even more favorable than it probably already is. A random stat: Joe Burrow was sacked over 50 times this season, and there's never been a quarterback to play in the Super Bowl that's been sacked 50 times. And I do think that's going to be a big part of this game for the Raiders. If there's one thing the Raiders defense does well is they create pressure and they can get to the quarterback, and that's something the Bengals offensive line has struggled with. So, that's where I could see the Raiders potentially having an advantage here. If Max Crosby and Yannick Ngakwe, I think I said that right. No, good
You
job,
did.
self. I don't say that out loud every day. But yeah, if they can get to Joe Burrow, then I think there's some potential for the Raiders to, I don't want to say shut down the Bengals, but we've seen it where they edged out the Cowboys a few weeks ago, the Raiders. They just beat the Chargers, kind of, or the Chargers beat themselves. I'm not really sure which way that goes. But I mean, so they've haven't shut down high powered offenses, but they've shown the ability to beat teams like the Bengals. So I think that's an interesting note. Derek Carr in his career is 19 and 13 against the spread as an underdog, so he's overall been fairly successful. Another thing I was going to lead off with is home teams on wild card weekend win almost 70% of the time. So a lot of times that's one of those things that's kind of the deciding factor for me when we're in wild card weekend. As silly as that seems, I mean, 70% is no small feat. We're not talking a coin flip here. So I think that this is one of those games for me where that kind of points the angle or the arrow more towards the Bengals. Other things I'll bring this up with every team that we're or every matchup that we're talking about. But the Raiders are 3-3 against playoff teams this year. They got blown out against the Chiefs twice and the Bengals already this season, and had a few other close matchups that they ended up winning. The Bengals were 4-2 against playoff teams, but I think it's really important to note that those two losses they had were to the 49ers and Packers, and they were only by 3 points. So the Bengals have really played up to their competition this year. And, we've seen it kind of the reverse with a lot of these teams, and we'll talk about that as we go through. But the Bengals have been really good against the top teams in the league, and I think that definitely benefits them as we move through the playoffs. Um, I guess the kind of the theme for me is the Raiders are just too inconsistent to trust. Do I think the Raiders, if they play good ball and get to the quarterback, have a potential to keep this game close? I definitely do, but I trust the Bengals offense more. They're at home. They've been waiting a long time for this. And if we're being honest about it, when you watch the Bengals play right now, I just like the confidence in the way that they're playing as a team. Joe Burrow, I've said it to a few guys in some of the chats were in on the side that Joe Burrow is 100% bringing a championship to Cincinnati at some point in his career. I like his leadership. I like his swagger. I think that at least gets them a win here. I like the under as well because the Raiders, I do think, will be able to not shut down Joe Burrow, but limit him. So I think this is a game where you see the running backs maybe control the clock a little more, which tends to keep the score lower. So I have the under as well and the Bengals covering. Few random stats that I or props that I like in this game. Mixon has an over under of 18 and a half receiving yards. The Raiders have allowed at least 20 receiving yards and to a running back in 14 of 17 games. I like those odds. I mean, that's a very high percentage. So I like Joe Mixon to continue that trend. And then I have Hunter Renfrow as well. The Bengals secondary hasn't really been fantastic. He's at 55 and a half yards right now on the over under, and I like him to go above that as well.
Yeah, I like that too. It looks like we both agree on Joe Mixon. Our
Definitely,
next
yeah.
game that we got is the 6 seed Patriots up against the 3 seed Bills. Oh, and also uh, the time for tomorrow that's the Raiders and Bengals is at 4:30 Eastern time. 6 seed Patriots against 3 seed Bills is at 8:15. That's the night game. 2 games tomorrow. Um, the Bills are 4.5 point favorites. The over under is 44.5. Josh Allen and the Bills, they've won their second consecutive division title, and they get to take on rookie Mac Jones and the Patriots for the third time this year. They met week 13. They didn't get their first meeting until late in the season, week 13. They won four. Patriots won 14-10 in that fluke weather game. Don't even talk to me about it. And then they met week 16
Hey, it
where the
still
Bills.
counts. It still counts.
It does okay or whatever. And then in week 16, the Bills won 33-21 when the weather was more reasonable. Um, I do like the Bills. I like the over. I'm not going to be biased, but I do like the Bills in the over. I'm taking the over because I like the Bills 30-17. So that's going to be 47 points with the over under 44.5. Unless you're on DraftKings and you're smashing the over, they got a little prop going on right now where every 5,000 people that smash the over, it goes down by half a point. It's like at 20 points right now. It's crazy. So that's some easy money right there. Um, my single game parlay for this one pays a little less. It's plus 475. Obviously, like I said, the Bills with the points, or Bills given the points, the over 44.5. And I'm going with a Devin Singletary touchdown. So another running back. But Singletary, the past 4 games this season, he's had a touchdown each game. He's averaging over 20 rushes a game. I think in week 18 against the Jets, he only had 19. Um, well, he was 22, 12, 23, and 19. So it's a little under 20 rushes per game the past 4 games, but he's been their primary back. Zach Moss has even been a healthy scratch in some of those games. Um, but 4 straight games with a touchdown. I mean, it's either if they're in the within the 5 in the red zone, it's either going to Josh Allen or Devin Singletary, um, unless they decide to pass it. But chances are he's going to get into the end zone at least once.
Yeah, and let me just say before I get into this a little bit, I feel like I'm living the dream right now. I'm up past my bedtime and I get to talk Bills football with you and the Rams later on. So
Oh,
I'm just
great!
living my
Just don't
best
bash
life
them.
right now. No, I'm not going to. Where things get wild after 10 p.m., so I'll be nice to the Bills. So let's see, where do I want to start with this one? I agree with you for the most part on most things, if we're being honest about it. A few random stats. Let's see. A rookie QB facing a top five defense has never ever won on wild card weekend. Just gonna throw that out there. So if Mac Jones and the Patriots win this weekend, we're gonna see a first. And I mean that's kind of bizarre to me. And whenever you're betting on odds and percentages and what gives you the best opportunity to win. And if we're just being honest about it, betting on the Patriots money line isn't a good bet. I mean, I personally have a tough, even with Bill Belichick and how great he's been in the playoffs. This is a different Patriots team. I personally struggle to side with the Patriots at all. Everybody's been talking about the last rookie to win in the playoffs in general was Russell Wilson. Side note, it's not that impressive because he was playing another rookie in that game, RG3. So no one ever says that, but I'm like, all right, either way, a rookie was going to win. So, I mean, yeah, I guess it's impressive, but either way, that stat was going to stand true, but we would just be saying RG3 now instead. One of the reasons I did want to talk about the weather a little bit, now the winds aren't supposed to be bad, which is what impacted that last game. But what does matter to me is Josh Allen, since he's come into the NFL, has the second worst completion percentage when it's 15 degrees or lower. So it's barely over 50% of his passes he completes when it's cold. So it might not seem relevant from the outside, but some guys, they just can't hack it. Maybe Josh Allen can't hack it in the cold. But I mean, and it's not like he's attempted 20 passes and he's 10 for 20. He's played in enough of these games now in the first few years of his career where he consistently has struggled in games that are cold. So, that's something to monitor. I think this is a game where the Bills are going to have to rely a little more on that run game. And typically that's the formula to win in the playoffs in general. But you mentioned it, Devin Finally, the Bills have run the ball a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, they've averaged 6 yards a carry over the last 4 weeks, which is second in the NFL. So they have that part of their offense really clicking right now, and I think that's going to be huge for them. Bills 2-4 against playoff teams this year. Patriots 2-3, so pretty similar record there. In the end, what it comes down to me, I don't trust Mac Jones. I don't trust the rookie quarterback in his first start. I think this is a game. If the Bills run the ball, the Patriots are focused on running the ball. I think that chews away clock, which in that case is the reason that I personally like the under. The other reason is whenever we see these teams play for the third time, I've seen where it trends towards defenses tend to adjust to offenses better than the other way around. So I think they've seen each other a few times. They know trends that they've seen the offense from the first two games. So typically, I think defenses tend to hold offenses to lower stats in that case. So with that's the reason I have the under, just because I think there's gonna be a lot of running in this game. I think the defenses are gonna be well adjusted, so I have the under and the Bills covering. I think the only prop that I had in this one was Damien Harris props. TD scorer. He's scored in 5 straight games. He's scored 15 touchdowns this year. So, I mean, when in doubt, that's never a bad prop if we're being honest about it this season. And then they only have him at 58.5 yards, which I don't know. To me, I know Stevenson's been more involved the last few weeks, but when Damian Harris has been healthy and 100% playing, I mean, he's hit that. I forgot to write down the exact number. I believe he's hit that in 10 games that he played this year, 58.5 yards or more. So I like both of Damian Harris's numbers there.
Did you see the forgot what I saw, but there's a crazy stat that the 6 seed versus the 3 seed is either undefeated since 2017 or there's been one 3 seed that won since 2017.
Oh, so perfect. The Bills lose. Okay, I'm changing everything I just said.
Yeah, it's crazy, but that's not going to happen tomorrow. All right, getting into Sunday, got some normal time football, 1 o'clock. The 7 seed Eagles up against the 2 seed Bucks. Bucks currently 9.5 point favorites. The over under is 45.5. Jalen Hurts is making his playoff debut up against another young quarterback in Tom Brady. They met back in Week 6, Thursday Night Football, 28-22. The Bucks won that game. Um, I mean, they could have put more points up on the board, but they were respectable and kneeled the ball down at the 5 yard line instead of scoring another touchdown. But I like the Eagles to cover. The 9.5 is a little bit too rich for my blood. The Eagles have been playing a lot better recently. Now they are, and this has been brought up in one of our chats that we have. Eagles haven't beaten a single playoff team, so maybe those
Interesting.
maybe those numbers are skewed for how they've been playing recently. But I mean, 9.5 is it's quite a bit. Now Brady could come out and Brady could come out and throw 4 touchdowns, but he's also he has struggled against the Eagles too, not just in the Super Bowl, but where he actually had good
Oh,
stats. But just overall, like he just has a tough time with the NFC East. My single game or the score that I got is I think the Bucks are going to win, but if we're talking betting, I'd like the Eagles to cover. I like the under and 24-17. And even if the Eagles don't cover, I I don't think that they're gonna personally score enough to where it still likes me where I still like taking the over.
Mhm.
So one way or another, I think the under is gonna hit. You just gotta decide if you like the Bucks to cover or the Eagles to cover with the 9.5. Um, wait a second. Wait a second.
Wait, there's more.
The single game parlay that I put together, it pays out plus 850. Um, and one thing that I didn't mention, and I've noticed it on a couple of my notes here, is so if you're just on the main betting page for most of these sites and you want to take the under, the over, and you want to take the point spread, it's one number. But if you click the single game parlay button and it brings you to a whole different screen where you could choose all the different props from that game, some of the numbers are going to be adjusted. So in this case, if you click on single game parlay, Eagles are only getting 8.5. So 1 point less, which could be a huge difference. But I'm still taking it. Eagles plus 8.5, the under 45.5, and a Mike Evans touchdown. So finally got a receiving touchdown, or at least a wide receiver. He can still rush it. But they're the Bucks are without their wide receivers aside from Mike Evans. Nobody else has really stepped up in that absence. I've been talking about Tyler Johnson for the past year and a half now, and he hasn't really. I mean, he has some splash, not even splash games, but like splash plays here and there. So Mike Evans, he's the vet there outside of Rob Gronkowski. Tom Brady likes him in the red zone, likes him when they're down at like the 1-2 yard line. You could see him get a 1 yard touchdown pass. So I think that if they're going to score, it's going to be. I think Tom Brady throws at least two touchdowns. One of them is going to be to Mike.
Yeah, I mean, it's about time a receiver scored a touchdown. I didn't think it was going to happen the whole weekend until you told me. So yeah, let's see. Where do we start with this one? Everybody keeps is convinced that the Eagles are going to run all over the Bucks. It is worth noting that the Bucks have allowed 100 rushing yards over the last 2 weeks, 6 yards per carry. They've definitely been a lot weaker over in terms of defending the run this well, really the second half of the season. But I think it's worth noting they've been really banged up. If you look at their injury report, no Shaq Barrett, no Levante David. Both of those guys are expected to return healthy this week. We'll see how much of that game they play, but it can't hurt to have those guys on the field. So that's A for me. B, can we look at some of the teams that the Eagles have played over the last 5 weeks, and why are we not talking about this more? Now, don't get me wrong, there was 6 or 7 weeks ago now they had a really nice game against the Saints, and I believe they played the Broncos the week before that and had a nice game as well. But I mean, people are taking it too far the last 5 games. They've played the Giants, the Jets, Washington, and the Cowboys. And the Cowboys, yes, defensively are better, but their rush defense is really not that great. So that I'm not impressed. Sorry, not impressed, Eagles. I mean, I did pick the Eagles preseason to make the playoffs because I thought their schedule was weak, and they had one of the weakest schedules this entire season, which that's why they're here, for being honest about it. I don't think that they're a bad team, but I'm baffled the number of people that are taking the Eagles to cover personally. And maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but I just it's I don't see it. You mentioned it. They're 0-6 against playoff teams this year. Their average margin of defeat in those losses is 12 points. So I mean that right there covers it. The Bucks have played, or and Tom Brady have played really well in the playoffs. I just think it's crazy to bet against him. I mean, I won't say crazy, and I'm honestly in the minority saying that. I've, read articles, I see people tweeting out, and everybody says Eagles are covering, Eagles are covering. They haven't played well against playoff teams all year. All of a sudden, they're going to snap their fingers and become this magical winning team. I don't see it personally. That's just my opinion. Like I said, it made me even more confident when I saw the average margin of defeat in those 6 losses because 12 points covers my 8.5. So I personally have the Bucks covering. I agree with the under. I do think the Eagles are going to try to run and take advantage of the Bucks rush defense, but if the Bucks are at full strength, and it looks like they are, I don't think that they're going to have as much success as other teams have had the last few weeks against the Bucks. The other thing I did want to mention too is the Eagles' pass rush has not been very good. They haven't generated pressure well at all. They've been in the bottom third of the league this year. They blitz the second least amount of any team in the NFL. I thought that was super interesting because when do we see Tom Brady really struggle? It tends to be against teams that generate pressure and are really good in blitz a lot. So I think the Eagles' defense isn't set up well to defend Tom Brady. I think they're not going to get in his face. I know he's missing weapons. I know. Everybody keeps saying that, but there's still Mike Evans. There's still Gronk. That 1-2 punch is better than most teams have. And I mean, some of those young guns have really stepped up behind those two guys. Fournette's going to be back, and he's been a threat out of the backfield. So I think they have enough weapons. I haven't been impressed with the Eagles, and I'm so surprised that people think they're going to snap their fingers and become a team that's super competitive against playoffs. And maybe I'll look stupid. I don't know, but I'm not betting against Tom Brady. I know it's the Eagles and the history and blah blah blah, but this is a different team. I don't like when people talk about things like that because that was a different defense, a different coaching staff, a different everything. So this is a new season.
Mhm.
The Eagles have played really, they haven't lived up to the, I won't say expectations, but they just haven't played well against playoff teams, and I don't personally see it happening this week. A few random prop bets that I like. Tom Brady, 268 passing yards. He's done that 12 times this season. That's a pretty high percentage there. I'll take that all day. Like I said, I think this is the kind of game where if the Eagles don't want to put pressure on Brady, you can bet your butt that Tom Brady is going to be passing all day long if they're not going to put pressure in his face. And then one of the things the Bucks have struggled with this season is they have not defended mobile quarterbacks well. So I do like Jalen Hurts' rushing yards. 50 rush yards seems a little high. He has done it 8 times this year, so about 50-50 here. But based on what the Bucks have done against mobile quarterbacks, I think that's a pretty reasonable number this week.
All right. Moving on to the late afternoon game on Sunday, we got the 6 seed 49ers up against the 3 seed Cowboys. This is finally their year, right? Right, Jordan? The Cowboys?
So no,
Everybody
we're
keeps on
not.
saying
I
it.
don't want anyone to win this game. Is that if it ends in a tie, I want the Saints to advance. That's what I said the other. I don't know how that happens, but I don't want either of these teams to win.
4:30 kickoff. Haven't checked, but I'm assuming that game's on Fox, and I'm assuming Tony Romo's gonna, or not Tony Romo,
Oh
Troy
gosh,
Aikman's
are
gonna be
they
part of it.
pairing Troy Aikman and Tony Romo
Yeah,
together
that
now?
would be.
Don't tell me that.
I'd rather watch it in Spanish. The Cowboys are -3, which is, I don't know if I agree with that. I think that it should be a lot higher, and the over is 51. This is going to be the fourth playoff game starter for both quarterbacks. Dak Prescott and Jimmy Garoppolo have both played in 3 previous playoff games. Jimmy obviously has the bench experience playing behind Tom Brady. He is 2-1 in the playoffs, where Dak is 1-2. They met, or they did not meet in the regular season at all. This is the game that they did not meet in the regular season. I like the over. I like a lot of scoring in this game, and I like the Cowboys to win 35-24. So they're covering, they're hitting the over, covering it by a couple if you want to tease it. My single game parlay is Cowboys obviously cover, the over 50.5 points. And then I like a George Kittle touchdown. With all those points, I think that San Fran is going to need to throw a little bit. George Kittle, he's been pretty consistent. He had that stretch where he was tight end one like 3 or 4 games in a row. Um, but just, I mean, of all the teams in the playoffs, the worst team against tight ends for fantasy points against was the Cowboys.
Mhm.
Now the rush defense, and you already mentioned it. We were talking about, or we were talking a couple games ago, or the Eagles game, that their rush defense isn't the greatest either. Overall, they got a good defense, but their rush defense isn't the greatest. And I think like Debo could get into the end zone, or Elijah could get into the end zone, but they're going to need to pass it too to try to keep up with the Cowboys. So I'm taking a George Kittle receiving touchdown in this one.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting game, and it's the one game everybody is kind of I mean, I'll say assuming. I think a majority of people are putting their money on the 49ers. And for whatever reason, that makes me super nervous. Like the Cowboys are just going to come out guns and blazing and really blow the 49ers out of the water. Um, 49ers were 4-4 against playoff teams this year, average victory of 7. Their average loss was 5 points, so that would not cover it. So it's kind of interesting. It could go in either direction when you're looking at it based on the season's numbers. The average total of those games has been 42, so well below the over under in this game. One of the big advantages I think that the 49ers have in this game is the Cowboys secondary has been overrated because of Trevion Diggs. And I haven't gotten to say that on camera, but I keep talking about it in group chats. But that guy's overrated. I don't care. He could have 1,000 interceptions and I'd still say he's overrated. Okay, maybe
No,
not
no,
a
a
thousand,
thousand,
but
a thousand would be right about where he's rated then.
I don't know what number he needs to have for me to say he's not overrated, but he's in coverage has been one of the worst corners in the league. And their secondary as a whole has given up the most yards after catch, which, if you know what the 49ers' MO is, it's running the ball and yards after the catch. Debo has leads the league in yak this year. Brandon Ayuk has been underrated in that department. George Kittle's very good. That spells a lot of trouble to me for the Cowboys in this game. I think their Micah Parsons is going to have to clone himself and play every position in order to stop the 49ers offense. I got to witness a little bit of this stupid 49ers offense in person in LA last week, and I was not thrilled watching it, but that's okay. But yeah, I think the Cowboys are really going to. I mean, I would take the 49ers straight up in this game if we're being honest about it. The rush defense, as we mentioned a few times now, struggled. One of the things that kind of makes you sit back and go, I don't know, is the Cowboys were 10-3 with the spread as favorites this year. And 6-3 against teams with winning records with the spread. Both of those were the best in the league. So there's a lot going in both directions, if we're being honest here. This is one of those games where it was a toss up for me, but I think the 49ers offensively have enough advantages. I think it's going to be a close game either way. If the 49ers want to win this, they're going to want to chew clock, run Elijah Mitchell, throw some screens to Debo, Kittle, Ayuk, let them run after the catch because we know none of the Cowboys secondary is going to tackle them. And so I think that if you go by that formula, I like the 49ers in this one. I'll take the points. Why not? But because of the 49ers strategy, I think they're going to try to keep the Cowboys off the field. I like the under, like I said earlier. Average total of 42 points against playoff teams this year for the 49ers. Cowboys were a little higher than that. I believe they're at 47 when I checked. So either way, it's been slightly under. So I like the under. I like the 49ers and the advantages they have offensively in this game. A few props that I like. Debo's over under for rushing yards is 28, which he's hit 50% of the time this year. I think that's going to be one of the if it's a perfect combination. The Cowboys rush defense stinks. They can't tackle guys. I think 28 rush yards is very feasible for Debo. I think they're going to be very creative in getting him the ball. And then the other, I do like Brandon Ayuk actually at 48 and a half yards. He went over 100 last week against the Rams. Um, and when we're talking about who's going to cover Brandon Ayuk, I don't know, honestly, in that Cowboys secondary. So I think it's very obtainable for Ayuk to get over 48 and a half yards.
All right, I like it. Our Sunday night game is going to be the 7 seed Steelers up against the 2 seed Chiefs. Chiefs are this is going to be the biggest spread of the week at 12.5. The over under is 46. This features one of the game's best young quarterbacks in Patrick Mahomes up against a future Hall of Famer in what could be his last game, potentially his last game.
We said
It,
that last week.
yeah, well, I mean, last week wasn't guaranteed. Um, Steelers kind of just limped into the playoffs. They won their game like they needed to. They needed extra time to do it, and then they needed other stuff to happen too. Um, I mean, they got into the playoffs because the Chargers coach was kind of boneheaded and didn't take it or did take a timeout. They met in week 16 where the Chiefs won 36-10. Is that right? It's week 16. Seems like it was just not too long ago.
Yeah,
I like
16. Yeah.
I do like the Chiefs to cover in this one with the 12 and a half. I'm thinking the Chiefs are going to stay right around what they scored last time, 35, and the Steelers. Maybe Ben gets a two touchdowns, three touchdowns to end his football career. They put up 21, so 35-21, which has the over and the Chiefs covering. My single game parlay is, like I said, Chiefs covering the over, and I'm putting a Najee Harris touchdown in there. So I don't know if you've noticed a pattern, but the last three games, the team that I have losing is the team that I have with the touchdown for my
Makes
for my
sense.
parlay. But Najee Harris touchdown, he could do it on the ground, he could do it in the air. He's caught over 70 balls this year. Um, they Obviously, they're without Juju. They've been without Juju all year. They do have pretty much their full weapons as far as Pat Fryermuth and Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool. So outside of Juju, they're really kind of full up there. I don't think Ebron's playing either, but Najee, I mean, he basically just doesn't come off the field except for when he got banged up a little bit last week, and he's gonna get the ball a lot. If there is a weakness to this defense, it is the run defense. You are able to run a little bit on them. And if you're attacking Dan Sorensen, you could also throw on him too because he kind of stinks. But overall, I mean, I think it's going to be, hopefully, it's an entertaining Sunday night game. I think it's going to get out bad early by the Chiefs. And then Steelers are going to try to claw their way back in and come up short. And we see Mahomes and Ben hug at the 50-yard line. That's the last time we see Ben.
Aw. Yeah, I mean, this game, gosh, I don't know. This game is really tough for me because when you're in the playoffs, every team is good, and I feel like a 12 and a half spread is just disrespectful. But in this case, I really don't think it is. I mean, the Steelers are potentially the most undeserving playoff team I've ever seen in my lifetime. I'm sorry to go that extreme, Steelers fans, but that's a reality is, the Colts really, and the Chargers for that matter, kind of handed the Steelers this opportunity. And the Steelers, I mean, if we're being real about it, they haven't thrived in many categories this year. If I was going to point to the Steelers' strength, it would be their pass defense. TJ Watt knows a thing or two about getting to the quarterback, and I think if the Steelers have any chance to keep this game close, it's all TJ Watt's going to need like 5 sacks. I mean, I'm being a little dramatic,
And
but I
three
mean
touchdowns.
seriously, and 5 touchdowns maybe, and it'll go to overtime then. But no, I mean seriously, I think TJ Watt might need like 3 sacks in a game where he just completely takes over for the Steelers to not even win, but just stay competitive. If we're being honest about it, and even Melvin Ingram's been pretty solid too. So their pass rush is very solid overall. The Chiefs' offensive line though has been pretty good. Behind or with Creed Humphrey, the rookie center sensation. I just want to talk about alignment, so I just got very excited. But yeah, I mean, I feel like 12 and a half is disrespectful, but when you look at all the variables, it's really not. If the Steelers want a chance, you mentioned Najee. The Chiefs gave up the second highest yards per carry. But the Steelers' offensive line is terrible. I mean, if we're being honest about it, that's why you can't even say the run game was a strength because, yes, Najee was good. He still averaged under 4 yards a carry. A lot of his opportunity was just volume based. I mean, if they ever decide to put out a top end offensive line, Najee could be the number one back in the league. I mean, he has that much upside, but I think it's going to be tough sledding. Looking at these teams against playoff teams during the regular season, Chiefs were 6-3, so I mean that's quite a few games. They're kind of tried and tested at this point and have been very successful. The Steelers are 1-6,
Don't
which
mention who that one game is against.
I
It was
will
Buffalo week 1.
not. Okay, you'll mention it. That's even better. But yeah, their average defeat has been 16 points in those games, which is enough to cover those. If you take out the two outliers where they got demolished by the Chiefs and Bengals by 1 billion points, their average defeat was only 10. But I don't think you can take those games out because I think they're relevant because they're playing that team this week. So the average defeat has been there. one of the things that worries me a little bit is I think the Chiefs feel disrespected right now, which is kind of weird to say, but all season tune into ESPN, Fox Sports Radio, wherever you want to listen, and everybody's saying the Chiefs just don't have it this year. I mean, I think that's dangerous. I don't think you wanted to give Mahomes and this entire team a chip on their shoulder, and I think the media has successfully done that. And I think that's really scary to think about. This defense has been better. I mean, their biggest vulnerability defensively is they give up a lot of big plays. I mean, are we betting on Ben making a lot of big plays downfield? I'm not. If you want to,
One,
have at it. But one, yeah,
one,
I
and
mean,
then his arm shot.
yeah, I mean, can he even throw it 20 yards down the field anymore? I don't really know. I mean, not very well, but I haven't looked at deep ball percentages in a while, but I'd imagine that Ben had to be towards the bottom in the league. Um, so yeah, I think everything points in the Chiefs' favor. This is their time of year to shine. They got a chip on their shoulder now. Even people are kind of making fun of the comments Ben make about made about the Steelers being the worst playoff team and how they didn't deserve to be there, but there's a lot of truth to that. So I think the Chiefs definitely take this. I mean, they're definitely going to win, but I have them covering as well, and I have the over because I think, I mean, even the Steelers defensively as a whole haven't been great. I mentioned their pass rush, but they're bottom, I think, 7 in almost every defensive category this season. So the Chiefs put up a lot of points. Maybe you see the Steelers get some garbage time points, but that should be more than enough to get this over the 46.5.
Yeah, and just going back to what you said about the Chiefs and like what ESPN and everything everybody was saying about the Chiefs. Would you agree with me in saying that like it just seems like the Chiefs they're just bored, and now that the
Yeah.
playoffs are here, they're just going to turn it up?
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me a lot of the NBA. I mean, we see superstars legitimately take rest days throughout the course of the season in the NBA playoffs because we all know that the regular season doesn't matter in the NBA. And I think I don't want to say it's this. There's less games in the NFL, so the games are a little more meaningful. But yeah, I mean, I think to a certain extent, yeah. I mean, this is a team that I mean, for me personally, I never even doubted that the Chiefs would still make the playoffs. I know early on when they were around 2-4, everyone was this is the end of the Chiefs and yada yada yada. But I don't know. To me, they just had too much talent. So I think they turn it on when they need to, and they've turned it on recently. And yeah, I mean, I think it's I don't bored might be extreme if we're being honest about it, but yeah, I think the sentiment is there, and there's something to be said about that.
All right. They will be without Clyde. That news came out today.
Daryl Williams hit every single prop, even though I couldn't find any. I wanted to hit every single Daryl Williams one.
And then our final game, we got some extra day football here on Monday. We got the 5 seed Cardinals up against the 4 seed Rams. That is at
Mm,
8:15 Monday night. Not sure of the network. I'm assuming ESPN if it's a Monday Night Football broadcast, maybe on
yes, sir.
ABC. The Rams -4, over under is 49.5. You got Matt Stafford leading his new team to a division title in his first year with them, facing off against Kyler Murray in his postseason debut. Stafford has been in the playoffs before, once with those lowly Lions, um, and now he's 100% in LA, taking them to the playoffs. They met back in Week 4. The Cardinals won 37-30. That was when they were on their winning streak to start the season, where they start 7-0, 8-0, something like that.
Yeah.
And then met in Week 14, where the Rams won 30-23. So a lot of high scoring between those two games. I do like the Cardinals to cover. I think it's going to be a very close game, but I'm taking the Rams to win. If I was betting on the money line, taking the Rams. Final score 31-28. So we got the over in there too. I just think that, I mean, with the 4, got to go with the Cardinals to cover. I think they win by a field goal. Um, my single game parlay is obviously, like I said, Cardinals to cover the over, and I'm taking Odell Beckham Jr. Ever since he got there,
Ooh.
ever since he got there. I mean, if I took Cooper Cup, that just makes my odds go down a lot. So ever since Odell got there, it seems like all he's doing is scoring touchdowns. Um, he's like Matt Stafford likes looking for him. There's a lot of players on that offense that can score between Stafford, or not Stafford. Well, I guess Stafford can score too, but Van
Nope,
Jefferson,
not allowed.
Cooper Cooper Cup, Sony Michelle, uh, Odell Beckham Jr. I mean, I could see Stafford throwing 3 touchdowns in this game, but and Odell getting one of them.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of options. Even Tyler Higbee had 2 touchdowns last week. I mean, he's a red zone threat as well. The Cardinals, if you don't remember, were historically terrible against tight ends last season, but they
Yeah,
improved this year. Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I'm excited to be at this game. This will be my first NFL playoff game in person, so I'm excited about that. Um, let's see. Sean McVay is 5-1 in his career against Cliff Kingsbury. In contests which these two have played, there's been an average of 55 points. So I do agree with you on the over here. The offense now, if we're talking about the matchup as a whole, the Cardinals' offensive line has been pretty bad, which is not good for them. Aaron Donald, Von Miller, Leonard Floyd up front have all been clicking more as of late. So I think that could be a pretty big disadvantage for them. The Rams secondary is a little banged up, which has me worried for their prospects moving forward. But in this, if they had DeAndre Hopkins, I think he could be an X factor in this game, if we're being honest about it.
yeah, he's
Because
out
what you
too.
saw, yeah, he's out. And if he was playing, I think I would change my pick to the Cardinals, honestly. I think he makes that much of a difference because Jalen Ramsey can only shut one guy down. And that's what we saw last week. He shut George Kittle down, and then they just fed Debo and Ayuk and even Jawan Jennings at the end of the game. Let's not even talk about that nonsense. But so the Rams, their secondary corners are not very good. And Jordan Fuller, one of their starting safety, who's very good in coverage, is out this week as well. So normally that would be a huge concern, but I don't know if the Cardinals have the weapons where I'm concerned about that. If you wanted to put a prop bet on a guy like Rondell Moore, I like Christian Kirk's lines this week as well, but I think one of those secondary guys has an opportunity to have a big game if you want to throw some money on one of those receivers against the banged up secondary. Both of these secondaries, if we're being honest about it, have been pretty weak as of late. So I think that's another reason why it's most likely going to go on the over. Looking at this was interesting to me. I kind of realized this, but I didn't want to look at the numbers. The Rams were 2-5 against playoff teams this year. The Cardinals were 5-2. A lot of those were early in the season, though. We all know that they've really struggled. You got to mention that J.J. Watt is back, so we'll see how that influences their pass rush. Um, yeah, so I think the difference to me here is the Rams' defensive front getting to Kyler Murray. That offensive line has been great. The rush defense has also been pretty bad. So if the Rams play this game smartly, the formula should be get to Kyler Murray against that weak offensive line and run Sony Michel into the ground. Cam Akers is back. He didn't play much last week, but run those two into the ground and get to Kyler Murray. And theoretically, this should be a game that they can, I don't want to say win handily, but when I analyze it just based on strengths and weaknesses, I do think the Rams can cover this one. The line's moved a little bit. I think it's at 4 right now, or is it at 4.5? It's moved a few times.
Yeah,
Um,
my notes had 4-4, but like I said, this was written a little
yeah, it's
earlier
moved.
today.
Yeah. And several of these lines have moved. If you got lucky, day one, the Cowboys 49ers was 3.5, and people jumped all over it, and they had to move their lines really quickly down to 3 because people loved that 3.5 because obviously it takes that field goal game out
Still
of
4
consideration for the Rams one.
on DraftKings. Still 4.
Yep. Yep. So I like the Rams to cover that. I just think that they match up really well with the Cardinals. They have a lot to prove. I'm not going to go on my Rams rant about how terrible they've been the last few weeks, but I think that their strengths match up well with the Cardinals' weaknesses. So I have them covering, and I've mentioned the over already.
All right, now time for our final segment. Every week that we do this, we're gonna do a segment called Prop Lock and Drop It. Eventually, we're gonna get a little sound drop too, but that's we don't have that yet. So Jordan's gonna sing it for us.
I
Basically,
thought you were going to sing it. We
no.
agreed you were pop, lock it, drop it.
Prop, lock, and drop it. So each of us are going to give you a prop that we like, an over under that we like, and a spread that we like. And just if you wanted to either throw them in a single parlay or if you wanted to bet each of them individually, but just something that like what we're most confident in. So my prop that I like that I'm most confident in is a Joe Mixon touchdown. Like I said, I mentioned it. That was in the Raiders game earlier in the season. He had 2 against them. He's been one of the best running backs throughout the season this year. He's been fairly healthy all year. He's just, I mean, he's a big part of that offense. He's the Joe Mixon that we've been that we've been wanting for the past few years, and he finally played a full season aside from the COVID game that he missed last week. And he's played the full season really well. So my prop is a Joe Mixon touchdown.
My prop is a Los Angeles Ram, Sony Michel, 58 and a half rushing yards. I think that's really low. I know Cam Akers is back, but I mean, he's coming back from a big injury. So this is still Sony Michel's backfield. I messaged it to you the one day, but Sony Michel led all running backs in the NFL in rushing yards in December. Like I said, this is a really weak rush defense for the Cardinals. If Sean McVay is calling this game appropriately, he's going to run Sony Michel 20 to 25 times against his defense. And if that happens, I really like 59 rush yards for Sony Michel.
My over under that I like is in that same game. It's the Arizona Cardinals versus the LA Rams. I'm taking the over of 49.5. Like I said, both of their games earlier this year, well, both their games this year have both hit the over. They both have potential to put up a lot of points. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins being out definitely doesn't help, but the Rams have all those offensive weapons. Kyler's a threat to run. James Conner just has a nose for the end zone this year. Christian Kirk should step up. Rondale Moore, AJ Green, he's been fairly healthy too. He's another one that has been on the field a lot of the season. So I like the over 49.5 in the Arizona and LA Rams game.
That's a good one. I have the over for the Chiefs and Steelers. We already talked about this game, but I think the Chiefs could put up a ton of points in this one. I think if the Steelers run Najee a little bit, take advantage of that weak rush defense of the Chiefs, they should be able to tack in 14 or so, which gets them right to that 46 and a half number with the Chiefs scoring big.
All right. And then my spread that I like, I'm going homer here. I'm taking the Bills minus 4.5 at home. It's just like I said, I'm you can't throw that week 16 or week 13 game out of the window, but the weather is it's going to be cold, but it's not going to be as windy. I think the Bills are going to be able to put their full offense out there, be able to run the ball. They're going to be able to pass the ball. The wide receivers are just going to have to suck it up and have bruises on their hands from after the game with how cold it is and Josh Allen throwing the football. But I think the Bills are going to be able to score not handedly, but they're gonna be able to put up enough points to cover that spread, win the game easily, and just go on to whoever they play next week.
Yeah, I unfortunately agree with you on that one. I wanted to initially go with that, but I think it's lame when people pick the same thing, so I'm not going to go with that one. I'm going to go with the 49ers plus 3. We talked about it already. I just think the 49ers offensively have quite a few advantages, and the 49ers will try to get the Cowboys to play their style of game, which is run up the middle, just a hard nosed game. That's not really the Cowboys' strength, but I think the 49ers will be able to move the ball pretty well against the Cowboys, and I like them straight up, so I'll take 3 points with it to boot.
All right. The only other thing that I had on here, well, I had two other things here. Especially if sportsbook is new to you and new to your area, take advantage of site promos.
Mhm.
DraftKings, for example, ran a couple last week for new users, and I mean, it was almost you can't say it was guaranteed money, but it was practically guaranteed money. You had to bet
Yeah,
$25 or no, it was $50 to
up to
win.
50, yeah.
You could bet up to $50 to win $50. There's no gimmick at all, but it was just either team in a specific game had to score a touchdown. And
Yep.
they had two of those. They had one for the Bills versus Jets and one for Alabama, Georgia. So if you threw
Mhm,
$100 down, you made $200 or you made an extra $100 to
mhm.
bet with. Caesars has different promotions pretty much daily for every sport that they got. They'll put together different line boosters where they'll put two player props together or three player props together that they got to hit, and those are just like I mean, not that you shouldn't do the research because you should do the research, but if you just want to go in there and throw a couple bucks down on Jason Tatum and Steph Curry hitting over 25 points, and Caesar's already made that bet for you, then throw a couple dollars down on that. And then FanDuel had a few too. They're running a couple different
Well,
ones
they
where
made me nervous. The one for Alabama, Georgia was the over. the total for the game had to be 40 points. That was their freebie. I'm like, I don't know how much of a freebie that is, but I think what was the final 43 points in that game? I was sweating that one out. I was like, that
I
wasn't
mean, it was
free
15 at
FanDuel.
halftime.
Yeah, I know. I was getting nervous. So yeah, it's they lied to me. That wasn't guaranteed.
But yeah, I mean, just look around. Like every day that you go on there, just check for the different promos that they got, and take advantage of them. I mean, you don't have to throw money down every single day, um, but you definitely want to. What the hell? We got to get rid of this. Yeah, we're gonna block that user on YouTube. All right. Um, but you definitely want to take advantage of those promos that they got, and then, but I mean, and don't sign up to every single one. And there's all these different new DF or
Yeah, Jerry.
DraftKings sites that are coming out. Just you don't have to sign up to every single one. Just stick to the ones that you like, and that's it. And then the last thing, figured we'd be responsible with it. If you have or know somebody that has a gambling addiction, get help. I mean, you don't have to call anybody necessarily. There's hotlines on the computer where if you want to chat with somebody, you can call somebody. But I mean, don't let it ruin your life. Don't let it ruin your marriage or your kids or anything like that. Just reach out to somebody, reach out to the hotlines and get help. And that's all I got for you guys. All right, how do we end this?